welcome to Forum, New Hampshire. My name is Dean, and I got Pat Murphy with me today. As you can see, Richie's chair is empty right now. He's going to be out for the rest of the year. He's got some other commitments, and he'll be back in January sometime. So we'll miss him. Richie, you're awesome. We'll miss you on the show, but we'll welcome you back when you get here. So we wish you all the best at this time. So we are concerned with the direction of our country. We're happy to bring you news and information that you will not find in the mainstream media. They are part and parcel to the international banking cartel, the New World Order, the oligarchy structure that operates this country and the world, and they are beholden to them. They do not report news to you. They report propaganda. They mind control you, even down to the flicker rate on your TV, which puts you into a trance so that you are more susceptible to the information they're feeding you to make you think the way you think. And if you're not getting news and information from alternative media, you're missing out on the fantastic, and I mean fantastic, worldwide show that's going on. This is one of the most amazing times to be alive, because what you have is one of the greatest ever battles between good and evil taking place in large part in this country, but all around the world. It's an epic battle, and you've been in a asymmetrical warfare program for most of your life. You didn't know it probably, but it has been happening, and it comes at you from all levels, from the food, the air, and the water that you drink and breathe, to the propaganda fed to you by 98% of the media in this country, and then also to the educational system, the government structures, darn near everything. They are pervasive. They are omnipresent in everything that you do. And it is a well thought out, well structured battle plan against you, the people, we the people of this country. And the idea is to create a world dominating tyranny, a world power that dominates you. And in order to do that, they have to take down this country. This country is the stronghold of freedom and liberty, even though we experience very little of it at this time. We have one of the most oppressive economic structures on the planet in this country, and financial structures. And we are fortunate. We are very fortunate to have a guy like Donald Trump who is going to battle against these criminal, syndicated, worldwide criminal power structure that is attempting to destroy our country and eliminate 90% of the population on the planet. If you think anything I said sounds ridiculous, guess what? They write about it, they brag about it, they talk about it. It's open in the public. You can find the information yourself, and if you're not willing to look, then sit tight on your couch and wait for them to come to your door and throw you into a FEMA camp, because that's their plan. However, there are a lot of people standing up to this onslaught of tyranny. The white hats of the world are stepping up. There is a beatback of these people. In large part the George Soros, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and the throw in their minions, the Bush, Clinton, and Obama criminals, and then you have what is basically their contingent that is placed in this country to criminally take over and tear it down, destroy our country. So they're losing. We have woken up. The people have awakened, and just like back in World War II, one of the generals from the Japanese army who had gone to school in the United States, Yamamoto said, "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant, and behind every blade of grass there will be a rifle." And,
2 rifles in New Hampshire.
There you go. All right, so that's our opening. Pat and I are going to talk about some various things today. I want to play a video, and I've talked about this guy before. His name's Benjamin Fulford. He puts out a report every week. I've been listening to it for a couple years. I love it because it's almost like a guy who's watching the worldwide battle, and he's a commentator on what's happening. But this particular week, it just struck me as being very informative in all the little pieces he talks about for an audience that maybe doesn't know what's going on and hasn't heard this sort of thing before. So I think it would be very informative for you and maybe enlightening. And he's not always accurate in his reports with everything that he says, but he's most of the time right on. and if he's not right on, it's because situations change and things are adapting and evolving as we go. So anything you want to start off with, Pat, before we go to that video? Do you want to, what do you have in mind today?
You can go right to the video
Pat,
if you
Pat
want.
has the autonomy to talk and preach about whatever he wants to on this show, because absolutely.
It is time for people to stand up. They're going to have to stand up, and if you can't see it now, I don't know what's wrong with you. You know, peel off all the blinders, because you're in the middle of big stuff right here, and
yeah,
watching the deviants get arrested, and everybody's they're just hoping, and they've been waiting and waiting and waiting for justice to be instituted. They want these people indicted and brought to trial.
Yeah,
and
yep.
it's happening. You're not going to see it in the media because that's part of the control mechanism. They are totally and completely corrupt from top to bottom, as well as being incompetent.
Yep, and I understand if you're ignorant and unaware of what's going on behind the scenes, because you will not find this stuff in the mainstream media. They're designed to keep you dormant, to keep you in check, and to keep you fat and happy, so to speak.
It's made to be confusing intentionally, too.
Yep.
So people are worn down. They're exhausted, and they don't have the wherewithal to slice on through and get to the core of things. So.
And that little bit of information that you're seeing about folks in Hollywood and a few politicians who are getting in trouble for sexual harassment or groping or smacking someone on the butt or whatever, that's a distraction, because what they're really hiding from you is that there is a Satan-worshiping pedophile control grid around this planet that sacrifices children. They involved in human trafficking. They are pedophilia elites that operate in the highest levels of government, media, and other places. You know, this is all about to come out, and it's going to shock a lot of Americans, because America has not been introduced to this. We don't talk about it. We don't think that way. We don't even consider that there might be that form of evil involved in running our planet or our country. And so it will be a shock for a lot of people, but it's all starting to come out. Now, you touched on one subject, which is the indictments coming down. I want to talk today, and when we get a little later in here, I got a short video.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the possible, and I don't know for sure, and I heard this a few weeks ago, and now I'm seeing more evidence for it, but the possible greatest sting operation ever being performed by Donald Trump and military intelligence that are working with him against the Bush, Clinton, Obama crime cabal. And we'll get into that more later. But let's just for a little bit listen to this Benjamin Fulford video, and he'll talk a lot about some of these things. But it's fascinating to hear, and it's fascinating to hear week to week what's happening in the world and what's happening with the power structures that are fighting and battling it out for good over evil, which we are hoping the good will win, and it's starting to look very positive. So here we go.
Information. November 20th, 2017. Hazarian Cabal Purge Accelerates. Marines storm CIA HQ. Over 2,000 indicted in U.S. Collapse of control grid in Europe. Posted on benjaminfulford.net. By Benjamin Fulford. The purge of the satanic Hazarian Cabal that turned the West evil is accelerating at an undeniable pace. Most importantly, Pentagon sources confirm multiple internet reports that Marines stormed the CIA headquarters this past weekend. One of the aims was to shut down Operation Mockingbird, the CIA group that turned the mass media, as well as Google, Facebook, etc. into mass mind-control propaganda, say NSA sources. The institutional heirs to the group that murdered President John F. Kennedy are also being rounded up, according to Pentagon sources. The Department of Justice and Special Counsel Robert Mueller are working overtime and may exceed 2,000 sealed indictments, a Pentagon source says. These moves, combined with the purge of all the Saudi royals and military who were linked to 9/11s, as well as the removal of Zimbabwe dictator Robert Mugabe and the imminent removal of Israeli Satanist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, leave no doubt that the long-awaited arrests and roundups of Kabbalists worldwide has begun. The Rothschild/Sachs-Gotha family group is also losing control over Europe. In Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, Hitler's daughter, failed to form a new government. In France, 100 legislators from Rothschild slave President Emmanuel Macron's party have defected, as mass protests against this election stealers rule break out all across the country. In England, Rothschild slave Prime Minister Theresa May is also unpopular and expected to be removed soon. Meanwhile in Japan, Admiral Harry Harris, commander of the United States Pacific Command, met with slave Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last week. According to sources who were at the meeting, Abe told Harris that Japan was preparing concentration camps for floods of North Korean refugees that Abe expects to arrive once Harris provokes a war with that country. Harris told Abe that he would do his best to make sure North Korea was stopped, the source said. Harris has thus proved that he is either incredibly stupid, incredibly evil, or incredibly bribed, probably a combination of all three. This one man is now preventing humanity from being freed from Hazarian mafia tyranny. Harris is sheltering the war criminal, traitor, and drug dealer Richard Armitage, as well as Rothschild criminal agent Michael Greenberg at the Yokota Air Base in Japan. He also presided over the recent theft, yet again, of a Japanese national election by Rothschild slave Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abe's looting of Japan's postal savings, public pensions, and other public money is the only thing keeping the worldwide Hazarian crime syndicate from losing all power. It is money being stolen from Japan that is propping up the U.S. stock market bubble, and keeping the Hazarian-owned United States corporation from going bankrupt and being replaced with a genuine democracy controlled by the people, for the people. The newly empowered Abe is now rushing ahead to build a biological warfare research facility disguised as the Cake Veterinary School. That means Harris is supporting a war criminal, and is thus himself a war criminal. Signaling who his real masters are, Harris made a speech supporting the Hazarian control grid at the Frank Lowy Institute on December 14, 2016. Lowy, together with Larry Silverstein, bought the World Trade Center buildings shortly before the September 11, 2001 Hazarian terror attack in New York. Harris is also under pressure from Lockheed Martin and other arms manufacturers to start a war with North Korea in order to promote arms sales and keep the Hazarian mafia in power. Harris is also in on the Hazarian plot to start World War III and murder 90% of humanity. Waiting until May of next year for this man to end his term is not acceptable. Admiral Harris, this is a promise. You will be arrested, court-martialed, and jailed as a war criminal and a traitor. You will also be held legally accountable for the murder by torture of 3 individuals you presided over at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. In any case, as mentioned above, the Hazarian hierarchy above Admiral Harris continues to be systematically dismantled, meaning the dragnet is closing in on him. Once he is gone, U.S. military police will march into Tokyo and arrest Armitage, Greenberg, Abe, and the other gangsters who subcontract for the Hazarians here. Sources in the NSA and CIA say that hundreds of arrests already took place in the United States last week. A decision was made to not announce the arrests, however, because doing so would allow for others to escape before the arrested people could rat on them, the sources say. There are also many Hazarian hit squads operating in the U.S. right now in a desperate attempt to maintain their control grid over that country, Pentagon sources say. These hit squads are being systematically eliminated. Part of that has been announced in the form of the arrests of 267 members of the MS-13 gang. Also, in a clear sign Hazarian rule is now collapsing, the non-Jewish governors of the Federal Reserve Board are talking about giving money directly to the people instead of their current practice of handing it out to billionaires and trillionaires. For example, John Williams, the head of the San Francisco Fed, talked about nominal income targeting, which is Fed speak for handing cash directly to the people. In Europe, Miguel Angel Fernandez Ordóñez, the former governor of Spain's central bank, told Parliament on November 7 that replacing monetary creation by privately owned banks with money created by a government-owned institution would be a good thing. This sort of public commentary by officials who are in actual power over money is a visible sign that the old privately owned central bank control grid is crumbling. Pentagon sources are also saying that regime change is no longer a U.S. province, as the military coup in Zimbabwe happened after the army chief went to China, and it is needed to position the asset-backed Zimbabwe dollar as Africa's reserve currency prior to the global currency reset. This fits in with what we have reported in a previous posting about India, Russia, and China telling U.S. President Donald Trump and Vietnam about their moves to set up a gold-backed currency as an alternative to the U.S. dollar. It also fits in with the news of Venezuela's default being played down because what really happened was that Venezuela stopped supporting the Hazarian petrodollar. The Rothschilds have been warned to give up on trying to derail this process by starting World War III, according to CIA and Pentagon sources. The Midair collision above the Rothschild mansion Waddesdon Manor may be a warning to back off from war with Iran, a Pentagon source said. Also, the UN acted to prevent the latest attempt to start a world war by sending a letter to diplomats last week informing them that the Saudi accusations that Iranian-backed Houthi rebels fired a missile at them were false. Israel, waking up to the fact that its apocalyptic plans were a delusion, is now desperately trying to form an alliance with Arab nations like Saudi Arabia in order to ensure its survival. It seems as if they are saying, "We Semites have got to stick together." Common sense would dictate that the Arabs will only do this after peace is reached with the Palestinians and their stolen lands are either returned or compensated for. The need for Israel to finally make peace with its neighbors is also being underlined by the ongoing purge of Jewish and Israeli influence in the U.S. On that front, Pentagon sources say, Russia Today and Sputnik were forced to register as foreign agents to set a precedent for the U.S. Department of Justice to force AIPAC and other Jewish organizations to do the same. The same sources are saying the sudden rush of accusations of sexual misconduct were also part of a purge of Jewish influence. Jewish comedian and Democratic Senator Al Franken was accused of sexual misconduct, and he may get expelled from the Senate as the purge of the Jewish mafia escalates beyond Hollywood to D.C. Creepy Joe Biden is next. Also, the Pentagon sources say that Fortress Investment Group and the owner of SoftBank, Masayoshi Son, were pressured not to lend money to the Weinstein Company, leading to its bankruptcy. Japanese right-wing sources say that Son is now being used as one of the main conduits to distribute fiat money being conjured up by the Bank of Japan, BOJ. He has also been given petrodollars by Saudi Arabia. However, a source who has worked for the Rothschilds for a long time says that Sun and Microsoft founder Bill Vaccinate Them Gates have together built a large underground bunker network in Karuizawa, Japan. The source says Sun paid for most of it, presumably using BOJ money extorted from the emperor by Henry Kissinger. Another source who worked as a golf caddy for Sun said he overheard him ordering a list of people to be murdered. The U.S. military has been advised to find an alternative to Sun and other criminals like former Finance Minister Hizo Takanaka to distribute BOJ money. Sun is not popular with the Japanese underworld and his radioactive half-life is not expected to last much longer. If Sun has any comments to make about this, he can respond to me via email. On a final note, a member of Abe's cabinet last week offered this writer a multi-million-dollar bribe to get me to stop writing my weekly reports. He was told, politely, to stick his bribe offer where the sun does not shine. Thanks for listening and watching. Subscribe.
All right, there you have it. So that is Benjamin Fulford, and you can find him on the internet. Just do a Google. What'd you think of that?
Pretty
It's a lot of information.
shocking.
Yeah.
Thing about Langley, we know that's true.
No, I was going to mention.
That's a big issue.
I made a a note here. We know that something happened. We don't know that they stormed the building. We do think they went in, but we know for sure that the Marine helicopters flew around the building low level for 30 minutes. That's a minimum. But there was reports that they were on the ground and they did enter the building. So it's not sure yet what exactly happened, but the Marines are working for Donald Trump, and there is a contingent within the CIA that is said to be continuing to arm the so-called rebels in Syria, which are really Al-Qaeda, ISIS, those folks, and they are continuing to fight against U.S. military personnel, injuring and killing U.S. military personnel, and that's why the military is fed up with the CIA and their operations over there.
Yeah.
So that's what's rumored to be going on, is that they are putting their foot down and
And
saying,
revolted against Obama when they wanted to go into Syria. You remember?
Yeah,
Going back a couple of years ago, and said, we're not doing it. That's the end of it. So this is big stuff that's going on. It's enormous stuff.
Yeah, the chief military guy, I forget the name of the position, but told Obama, we're not going to be your air force for Al-Qaeda over in Syria. Yeah.
So actually, Donald Trump is conducting a counter-revolution
He is.
against what's been an ongoing revolution
Yep.
that really accelerated with Obama coming into office.
Yes.
And was going to be the closer on the deal in terms of just wiping out everything this country stood for.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Do you remember when Obama first came into office?
He was expecting to have a fundamental change like this country's never seen before,
Fundamental transformation.
Creating an internal security force as well-funded and well-armed as the regular military.
Yeah, when you use the word fundamental, what's that? It can mean a bunch of things, but basically it's the origin of something.
Yes.
So he's going to change the origins, the constitutional makeup, and things like the Declaration of Independence. It's all going to be wiped right out, be transformed, meaning change. So just the fact that he was using language like that, you wonder how we get to this point right here, how he lasted as long as he did. And we know that a lot of it was, by ballot stuffing and all the things that they do. But it doesn't speak well to the knowledge that the average person has in the country. They're just not up to par with the reality of what the world is and what a dangerous place it is.
Correct. I agree with you
scary.
wholeheartedly, yeah.
I remember when he came in 2009 and Homeland Security came out and they produced a document on terrorism, and they listed everybody that was a potential terrorist. And anybody that was against abortion, if you're part of the pro-life movement, potential terrorist.
Christians.
If you're against gun control and gun registration, you're a terrorist, potential terrorist.
Former military.
If you're against lax immigration laws, potential terrorist. If you're against their idea of free trade, which is not free trade, corporate welfare and corporate fascism, a terrorist. But there was an entire list of things where if you were against any of his policies, you're a potential terrorist.
Right.
If you felt uncomfortable with foreign nations, or you're against communist regimes, terrorist. And you read that list and you say, you've got to be kidding. That was 2009. So we've survived to this point, and we've got somebody now that, thank God we have him, because you're not going to see the likes of him again. He's somebody that comes around once in a million years.
We have to remember that the groundwork was laid out for 100 years for that man to step into office and do what he did.
Yeah.
And so it is unfortunate that we, the people, are lacking in education and civics and the fundamentals for the structure of our country, the founding, and the principles on which freedom and liberty survive. And so it was relatively simple and easy for him to hoodwink the Americans into thinking he was doing something special for them. Great orator, great con artist, and a sneaky rat.
Well, the education's been deformed, and it's not necessarily, as I said before, the teachers. They're they're stuck with what they have for text and what they have to cover and what they have to fill out. And so things the kids should be learning, younger people should be learning, who become the leaders and voters and things like that, they're just not learning. They're getting a distorted view of history.
Yep.
Yeah.
What else you got on your agenda today?
Well, there's just a lot of stuff going on. I watched my favorite guys of all time. I watched the Polish guys with their hundreds of thousands of people in the street with their Polish flags, and I guess 1 million of them are on the border there, saying the rosary. And I said, how can anybody deny that we've gotten into the mess that we're in because they've denigrated traditional religion for so long, particularly Christianity and especially Catholicism. I mean, that is if you look at that country, that is a country that was Catholic to the bone. If you look at the role that church played in keeping its language and knowledge alive, it's very similar to Ireland. And you look at those guys, and they're basically saying, nobody's coming here with bad intentions to injure our women or our children, and we're going to show you what we mean. And it's refreshing to see a country that's that together. You contrast that with Sweden, where they're turning right over, or Germany. It's different as night and day.
They're laying down and taking it because they.
And the good thing I hear is because I'm an American of Irish ancestry. That the prime immigrant group going into Ireland right now is Polish.
Okay.
So all the O'Hanigans and the Flahertys and the O'Regans, the kids will probably first name will probably be Stanley, which is okay with me, because they're a great country. They really are showing the world this is what it's all about. Take a stand.
Yeah.
They need to stand up. They need to stand up in this country.
Yep.
Their moral value system in continental Europe has been so eroded, since the Napoleonic Wars, and especially since the First World War. But those socialist systems have used atheism to destroy any value system that they have, and have turned those people just so they surrender so easily. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
You can see it.
Yep.
You can see it. So, what does that prove? People need to get back to their roots and to get back to their faith, and particularly, I say the Catholic countries, you guys need to step up to the plate, and they need a house cleaning, because there's a revolution going on inside of that church, just as there is in this country right now. It's huge. It's enormous.
Yep.
It's gone on for a long time.
So what are your thoughts on the battle overall and where we're at? Because I know I painted a picture at the beginning of the show that
we need more people to stand up, because the people who have been in the fray for a long time are exhausted. They're really tired.
Yeah.
It's a lot of tough stuff all the time to watch some of this, and it has an effect on you. It wears you out, and they need more people to step in and just do a little bit.
Yep.
They need to start challenging things in their schools. Parents need to participate. But the problem there is a lot of them generationally been brought up in a system that hasn't really given them the type of knowledge and the resources that they need to have to make the right decisions on these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Education is huge.
So in other words,
moral conscience is huge.
They are a product of the system. They hope to prevent taking over, but they don't even have the information they need to fight it.
We've mentioned it before. Modern dictatorship, totalitarian dictatorship, are two primary elements that really stand out, and one is the destruction of the ability to use logic. People cannot make an informed, rational decision, and they feel helpless. And then also on par with that is destruction of moral conscience, so that people will go along with all those bad things when they start to happen, try to rationalize them, saying, well, I really, by myself, I can't do anything. And that is really the most dangerous person in an impending dictatorship and in a developed dictatorship, is the average person that has that view that, well, I can't really do anything. I'm going to retreat to my own world and only minimal participation, not really be for this, but not take an active stand. And that's what makes it possible. Because these movements they're a tiny, tiny minority at the top that imposes its will on people.
Yeah.
And we talked about theories of history before.
Yep.
And we talked about people like Trump. And look what he's done as an individual with his intelligence, his willpower, and the force of his character, which is monumental. And what could have happened if it had gone the other way in the election?
Right.
If they could have stuffed another 1 million ballots in there for her.
Yeah, well,
Think about it.
apparently Harvard or somebody came out, I think it was Harvard, said that over 5,000 ballots were fraudulent in the recent
I
election.
did a study, yeah, oh yeah, it was absolutely fraudulent.
I'm sorry, not 5,000, 5 million.
Yeah, yeah.
5 million of the
Right.
votes, which were a majority for Hillary, were fraudulent, using various means. And we saw videos of them all over the YouTube and elsewhere of women at ballot boxes waiting till the end of the day, and someone standing guard, and the other one starts dropping handfuls of ballots into the ballot box, just stuffing the crap out of the ballot box. And those people are hopefully under arrest at this point, and because that's criminal activity.
Now, people want the rule of law. That's one of them. They should go to prison for that. It should be a very, very, very serious crime.
Yep.
Is defraud somebody's right to vote. Take away from the rest of us.
It's a little disturbing to see a middle-aged woman, or several of them, stuffing a ballot box. It's just so annoying.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's incredible. So one of the things going on in this counter coup is the whole Uranium One gate, if you will.
Right.
Have you heard a lot about that?
Just a little bit.
So one of the things, just for the audience sake, that in the past few years you've seen a lot of news propaganda on the Bundy Ranch out in Nevada and the Hammond Ranch in, I think, Oregon. And the real underlying story there is that the land that those ranchers were on, which, by the way, those were the last of many, many ranchers who were forced off their land in one way or another, coerced or however they did it. And these were the last people taking a stand who'd had their family there for 100 years or more. But they wanted that land because a lot of that land has the either uranium or other rare earth minerals. And there was a deal with China, and Harry Reid and his son were involved in that deal on the Bundy Ranch in Nevada. And on the Hammond Ranch, I think, is more of the uranium deal, if I have it right.
Mm-hmm.
But they, there was supposedly a solar farm being put in by the Chinese out there in Nevada. But the Chinese, they've wrapped up. They have control of roughly 98% of rare earth minerals on the planet. So they have scoured the planet and the Chinese are all about production and growth and development and peace, believe it or not, and so are the Russians. And so that gets into this sting operation. But before I get into that, I want to welcome Linda to the stage. Hi, Linda. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Happy
Nice
to
to
have
see
you
you.
here.
Thank you
Linda
very
is,
much. Nice to see you.
Linda's been on our show, I think, a couple times before. And so welcome.
Pleasure to be
Yeah,
here.
glad
I'm
you're
so
here.
glad.
So
Thank
we
you.
just to bring you up to date, we introduced the asymmetrical warfare plan against us here on the planet, and
Well done.
we played Benjamin Fulford in his weekly. It's the first time I've played him on this show, but he had just such a overarching recap of the game plan that's being played out, and I thought it would be kind of fun for the audience to hear that. And I know you've heard Benjamin Fulford before.
Yes.
So, and now we're starting to get into two things: the Uranium One and the sting operation that is purported to be going on with Trump. So, I don't know if I can lay this out very well, but I'll try.
Forward.
Doing great.
Move
But
forward.
this is
and
this is a
your
fascinating
viewers
thing
will-
because I was fully under the spell of thinking that Trump was being duped and attacked, and I couldn't understand why things were happening the way they were. And I was like, oh my God, Trump, you got to kick these dudes out of there. Like, at the FBI when they put the guy, what is his name? I can't think of his name, but
Mueller.
Mueller in to do the special
Right.
counsel and the special, prosecutor for investigating. So this is how they operate. Okay, the Clinton cabal, the Obama people, they, over the last 5 years or so, got involved in this Uranium One deal with Russia. And they were bought off by Putin and the Russians to sacrifice or to give away 20% of the U.S. uranium production in our country. Of course, uranium is used to make nuclear weapons, and so it is a little strange that you would have Hillary Clinton during the campaign, attempting to call Putin in Russia and blaming Trump for being saying he wants to be friends with Putin. She vilified him for that. So she made Russia out to be the enemy. Yet she was the one who was dealing with Russia and getting paid off in the Clinton Foundation. Podesta was involved in it. Obama was involved in it. And many department heads were involved in it. And I'll read you something on that in a minute. But it's actually starting to come out in the mainstream media because Sean Hannity reported on it recently. But so the idea of the sting operation is this: even Putin was likely to be in on the setup because he knew these guys would go for this deal where they would of course accept money or power or influence to any degree that they can get it. So he offers to set up this uranium deal, and they go for it, and he sets them up for the fall. Then Trump, knowing all along that those guys were head deep into this uranium deal, they conducted the whole deal, he knows all about it, and he brings Robert Mueller in, and he did meet with Robert Mueller prior to taking office, but after his election, I believe, is the time frame. And the idea of the sting operation is that Robert Mueller, who was also involved in all these things, probably got flipped. And but you watch Trump during the election, and he talks about he's going to be great friends with Putin, and they're going to make great deals together. And every time he does it, the Clintons and the others just all jump on him, and every time it happens, they like attacking him. Great. So true to the form of criminals who lie, cheat, and steal to get whatever they want, the Democrats, the media, and the Clintons and the Obamas, they all jumped in on this whole Trump being associated with Russia and having improprieties with Russia collusion, the Russian collusion gate, if you will. And they've been pounding this for longer than Trump's been president. So before he was even elected, they started getting this thing going. And then after he was elected, they really got into it with the Trump and the Trump family. They'll ruin lives, and they've ruined a few lives along the way because that's what they do in order to get their agenda and to get their way. But the truth is that now it's come out that the one piece of evidence for even considering that Donald Trump had been in collusion with the Russians was this one intelligence dossier that came out that was flimsy at best. But they used it, and they just pounded it in the media because they know that whatever lie they tell often enough becomes the truth because you'll start believing it. So they went after it, and the truth is that now it's come out that Hillary Clinton paid for that fake dossier stating that Donald Trump was involved in Russian collusion. She paid for it. So she created it as a false, as a fraud, and then the media, of course, ran with it. The Democrats ran with it. And so Trump knew all along they would do this, and he suckered them into doing it. And so the whole sting operation idea, if it's true, is that Trump had Mueller in the bag. So Mueller went into the FBI as the special counsel and created this investigation into the Russian collusion, knowing that any investigation into Russian collusion is going to just lead right down the rabbit hole of this whole Uranium One deal. So at this point in the Justice Department, there are over 2,000 sealed indictments, and the number keeps growing every day, and they will likely be coming out real soon. But those indictments will include names that you are very familiar with, and I don't know that it expands into the whole pedophilia network, but I would assume that it probably does. Yeah. But it certainly includes this the Uranium One deal. Podesta resigned from his company, and his brother resigned from his company, knowing that this whole thing is coming to light. There's speculation that because who's the senator, McCain and Clinton started wearing a boot on their foot the same day, that they have one of those GPS things on their ankle. I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of fun to mention it because it would be the beginning of the joy and the satisfaction of seeing international crime syndicate criminals finally being held accountable, finally being contained, and finally being dealt with by the decent people of the planet. So, hallelujah to that whole idea.
Hopefully they're warming up for leg chains in Leavenworth. That's what the country wants. And I'll tell you, everybody I know is going to buy a bottle of champagne the day that they're sent off to the Huskow where they belong, because they are criminals of the first magnitude.
They are
It's
horrible, yeah.
It's unbelievable what the people have to go through watching the sheer level of corruption in this country. And we know it's, you're only seeing a portion of it. It's huge.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
It's pervasive, and it's all coming to a head. And there's a lot of people in government, a lot of people in corporations at the higher levels that are decent people, but they get it. They're number one, they're compartmentalized. So a lot of times, what they're doing, they don't have the full scope of what they're participating in. So they don't have, and even if they have an idea of it, they really just are there to do their job. They want to take care of their family, and they continue to participate, knowing that there is some very threatening people above them, and they see people get made example of below them or lateral to them or above them, and they know that, boy, if they step out of line, they're going to be destroyed, because that's exactly what happens. They destroy lives. Look at the former head of the Democratic National Committee, not
Schultz?
not
wasn't it?
Schultz. No, the other one.
Donna Brazil?
Donna Brazil. It's very telling that when in the mainstream media you see Donna Brazil come out with her book and throw Hillary under the bus, and then Elizabeth Warren throws Hillary under the bus, and who else? Someone in particular in the Democratic Party. But when you have that happening, that's because they know what's coming, and they are distancing themselves from her strategically, not because they think she's bad or she did something wrong, because a lot of, well, with Donna Brazil, she's actually a decent woman.
Well, it's like Alan Dershowitz, and then he's condemning everybody. He's one of the guys flying to Fantasy Island saying, yeah, okay, nice try. We don't care if you're a Harvard attorney. You're guilty?
He's
you're
one of
you're
those
in
guys.
line. Book him, Dano.
Welcome, Dano. That's
He was on
great.
those flights?
Yeah, yeah, supposedly.
I
yeah.
didn't know that yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Alan, good
Yeah.
grief.
It's coming out.
He's gonna-
Everything rises
He's
to
going
the
to aid
top.
he's going to aid the prosecution, though. You can tell, So
Well, there's a lot of people that get, they get in deep, and I forget the term I heard today, but there's Robert Steele, former CIA whistleblower, was talking about. He believes in repenting and flying true again. Yeah, I screwed up, but I really have a good heart, and I want to do the right thing, and I want to straighten my life out, and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of space in humanity for people to return to doing the correct thing. And so I think there really is only a small fraction of people who are just to the core evil and just can't be anything other than deviant and divisive.
And if they knew the real history of the country, the stuff they're not taught, they would have anticipated this a long time ago.
Exactly.
You look
Yes.
back,
Exactly.
it goes way beyond Jack Kennedy being killed. You go all the way back to the Second World War, to George Patton being murdered. And you look at Patton's fight with Eisenhower over the release of German prisoners, where you have over 1 million that die in camps on the Rhine River at the end of the war that die of exposure. I know people that have seen that and been involved in it, and that's true. It was kept under lock and key forever. It's one of the primary reasons. It was an immoral act, and Patton was basically a tremendous general and a moral individual. Or the same with a thing came out in '75 called Operation Keelhaul, where you had between 2 and 5 million Russians that were pushed back, given over to the Soviet Union through Austria and northern Italy, and sent to their deaths, including Russians that had not even gone into the German army, that had been not even been involved in any part of the war, had lived in Germany and were turned over to the NKVD. In fact, the NKVD was surprised at, why are we even getting these people? But that's FDR and that's Churchill. And when you hear all these wonderful things about those two guys, but you really have to understand the politics of that time period, and you say that this stuff here, it's not that far-fetched. Look at some of that, and the sheer size of it is just so absolutely treacherous and murderous.
You sent me some interesting stuff today. You want to
Yes.
comment on any of that, or?
That's a Rhine Meadow Campgrounds. You can look that up. Then the
Is
other
it?
is Operation Keelhaul. That's a fact.
It was done on
Good
Sad
purpose.
thing.
Yeah.
Very sad thing.
Yes, and with this, what are we seeing? They're talking about over 10 years, they believe people will make a study of the real history of what was really happening behind the scenes in the laws, in the banking, in the politics.
Yeah.
And so it really is a time for people to actually get involved and take a look at what's available on the internet. And also, if we take a look at what's happening here, you're talking about heavy hitters wearing boots.
Yeah.
You're talking about 2,000 indictments waiting.
Right.
That means that
Right.
it's time right now to actually put into position what you might need if our banking system goes down, if we end up with any economic fallback from this, because a lot of people will be shuffling very quickly to either hide themselves or disengage, like the Democratic Party. And with that, there always, as you just said, there's so much that happens to the citizens of the country
Right.
when the politicians are
Yeah.
running for cover.
The
And-
elites run it, and we
Yeah.
discussed that before. in
We
theories of
back
history
them
that
into
you'll
a
have
corner.
individuals that are good, or you have the Hitlers and the Stalins that are bad. It's a mass of the people in between that get pushed one way or the other. Fortunately, we have somebody like Trump, who's a good moral character and intelligent and extremely courageous. He is an extremely courageous individual, and that's the one thing I think that saved us now. I mean, there's a ton of us that we want to do things, but we're divided up across the nation. It's it's hard to get together, but he's been a rallying force. So.
No doubt.
Yeah, you can study the history of elites. There's a historian named Buckminster Fuller that deals with stuff like that, and you see some of these same characteristics. And one of the things you see on some of these power seekers that's very common is an element of sadism in a lot of them.
Yep.
And then you look at this thing with all of these children and the disappearances and the pedophilia, and you say, it's not that far-fetched. And you could find that with elites, you say in Anglo-Irish history, and you talked about Oliver Cromwell and the British sending children from Ireland to Barbados for the same type of thing. And that's hundreds of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just par for the course.
Right, but history seems to have repeated itself.
It's human nature.
As-
It's human nature. Not that it runs in cycles, but it's human nature that repeats itself. You get a person, a decent person, and all of a sudden they're in a position of power. They get more and more power. It's inevitable that they're going to change. And that's reflected in your Constitution in Madison. A power will always corrupt. So you have to fragment power. You break it up, and you keep an eye on everything all the time. It's going to corrupt. It's going to corrupt you.
Wow.
Everything the founders did to structure our country to prevent what they were trying to prevent was
Right.
what we have today.
Yeah.
Was exactly it.
What you've had is you've had a movement historically. There's always been a battle between good and evil, but you've had a movement for the last few hundred years since the French Revolution that's destroyed moral conscience. It ravaged it in France. That's a horrific movement. We talked about that, and you can see people in Europe trying to hang on to the remnants of religion that they had in the First World War, with the sheer volume and the mechanistic killing will totally destroy that, and you have a vacuum created in Europe. And then all those isms that Dostoevsky talked about will creep into that. It's fascism, Nazism, communism, and they fill that void.
Yep.
That's what's happening. You look at Germany, they can't respond to the violence coming into their country now because their value system's been destroyed. You look at Poland, totally Catholic country, and those guys are out there, a million of them, saying, you're not coming in here, you're not turning the country upside down, and we're going to show you Polish style what it's all about. That's
Yes,
like-
yes,
that's
it's
exactly what it
wonderful to
is.
hear.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to
Yeah.
hear because cultures, if they're disseminated, will just take hundreds
Right.
of years to even figure out what happened.
Well, this whole thing with revolutions, there are common elements through that, and what you find is they're using sexual perversion now like they never have before. You could see it in the French Revolution and other revolutions in European history, all the way up until today, but especially right now, where they're attacking the family, they're attacking the parents' parental authority, and then you're intentionally confusing these kids. So there's 70 or 80 different types of sexuality, or it's a fluid type thing. And now you look at Canada, where if you tell your son who's gone to school as Walter that when he comes home that he's not Betty, you can be arrested.
Yes, Headgames.
You've got to be kidding me.
Headgames. So people actually have to then mimic just for fear of having the
Yeah.
law enforcement come and
Right.
interact with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's it's a very dangerous time to.
Yeah. It's similar to Germany. They called that, there was a psychologist, Walter Lange, they called that the little brown master of the household syndrome, because a 10-year-old would come home with a tan uniform. It was a pimp at 14, would become the Hitler Youth, and would just look at the father and mother, just wait for a mistake, back to the institution of school that was perverted, and then turn them in. It was the same in Russia, or the Komsomol.
They're doing that kind of stuff here. See something, say
You've got,
something.
you've got
Yeah,
them
they're
right
doing-
here in this state here, where they've got them up on stage and they're applauding them.
Yeah.
And then you've got a captive audience that has to sit there, and it's almost like they're afraid not to collapse or not singled out. They need to stand up. Now's
Yeah.
the time to stand up.
Yep.
Yes, and
They
you can
definitely
see
do.
that in media, in Twitter and Facebook. It's all censored, so you can only see a portion of what is rising to the top with people. But it's unending, scrolling, angry
Right.
people just saying we're
Right.
ready to take back this country and
Yeah.
just put an end to all this Common
Yeah.
Core, the
Yeah.
crap that they've tolerated for
Yeah.
so long.
Horrible. They need
And-
new institutions. You take these. It's like Stanford, Harvard, Yale. All of these. You look at these professors, especially the ones that have called for the annihilation of white culture. To me, they're calling for the killing of people. I'm
Yes.
sorry,
Right.
but that's what they're saying to me. And those people, they have no place in the academy whatsoever. They need to be expelled.
No, they're
I
calling
think the
for
guy
genocide.
from Drexel is teaching off campus now, and he should be. Or why would he even be associated
Yeah.
with one of those schools? I would think that somebody that graduated from an institution like that had a degree from Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Dartmouth, wherever, that had worked hard to get that, would protect the value of that and get involved and say, you know what, we want nothing to do with people like that. Educating anybody, because
Right.
they do not belong. And they're very dangerous people, because it will start like that, and you'll think that's a lunatic fringe, and they're there for a short time. It's only ephemeral. It was the same thing in Germany with Hitler. They came out with Mein Kampf, and Rosenberg produced a myth of the 20th century. Say, well, these guys they're the lunatic fringe. They didn't have any power then, and that became the core philosophy of that entire movement. At great expense to millions of people.
Yep.
It's very, very serious stuff. They need new institutions.
Yep.
They need new schools.
Well,
Right from the
Linda-
ground up.
Linda, you made a good point that, like a cornered rat, these folks that are still hanging on to power, they could do some very dangerous damage, before they get ultimately thrown out, and in particular in the banking system, because that's really who is at the top of the control. And of course, the banking system controls our currency. So if we run into some difficulty there, that could mean severe struggle for we the people of this country all over, because you could see an instantaneous stop of the 40 million, food card systems.
Right.
And but Trump has the power, and I was hearing this today, to create a jubilee and remove all the debt from this country, which I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And he'll have the power to create a new currency if we did a treasury dollar, which is what Kennedy was attempting to do when they killed him. But that a treasury dollar could put us on even footing, stable footing, but it would take a very difficult period of time, from the end of the system to that one functioning, whether it was 6 months, 2 years, whatever. It would be very difficult. So there are ways to stabilize yourself, but you have to be thinking ahead and planning things out and preparing for what might be difficult times where your distribution of goods and services are at a standstill for a while. Your shelves in your grocery store could be bare for a while. And we see it happen during emergencies, but people don't understand. You could have larger emergencies, nationwide emergencies, that put a stop to distribution of our products, and we are all at stake for that. So, yeah.
Right. I think just as every parent should be aware of what's happening, even if you don't have time to understand the politics or the banking. If you push for time, just simply assess what you might need as specialty backups for medication, and just general sustainable groceries for your children. because we've seen this over and over in time. And I think that now we're around the 7th country. There are 7 countries now that have been very affected by hyperinflation.
Venezuela, I mean, that's cannibalism. It's
Yes.
out of control.
Right, and what they're seeing in Venezuela is the government doesn't want them to use cryptocurrencies.
Right.
The adoption phase to actually learn it, depending how comfortable you are with technology, there can be a delay in just that process. So I wouldn't count on it. If you're not already into cryptocurrencies or any other standards like that, then it's really best to use the dollars you have now. And on a personal level, I'm looking at a year where I want to have this minimal sustainable goods and rice and dried vegetables just packaged away so
Right.
that if we end up with any kind of interruption, I can be useful to my neighbors, to my friends, to my extended family. And then if it goes to waste and I don't use it, I will count that a blessing because it means that it never happened and we never lived that. But considering they've done such unbelievable actions as a unit of those people that are now have indictments, as a unit, they're absolutely careless when it comes to the regular everyday people. And their belief is that the world is overpopulated. So they actually believe they're helping out karma in a big way by knocking off people.
They want to cull the herd.
Yes. So when you're dealing with that kind of a mental
Right.
point of view, they're not actually thinking that they're doing anything wrong. Right? In a
They
very
lack-
strange
they-
way.
They may be. There are some who lack the compassion gene, or what would you call it? The compassion, or the other another word.
They're a ruling class.
Yeah.
It might be about 15% of the total population of this country. And you can notice that in the language and what they criticize, where they criticize, those people who hang on to their guns and religion, and they seem to think that they're far more intelligent than the vast majority of us. It's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it coming out of these institutions that, to me, they're 10th rate. They have been since I was a kid.
You know, I loved reading Robert Kiyosaki's books and another book called The Millionaire Next Door. And what you find is that the average millionaire in this country was not an A student. They were C
Right.
students. They
Right.
they went into trades, and they just methodically moved forward and did the jobs. They're little small business owners. 70% of millionaires are real estate owners, real estate investors. So it really isn't about. And what Robert Kiyosaki found is that the
Right.
professors of the world and the intellectuals had a very hard time accumulating wealth, and we're not
Well,
good
a
at
lot
it. We
of-
have 2 minutes, so
A
go
lot of
ahead.
those institutions caved in the 60s, and they had ethically compromised professorate. A lot of them, they're intellectually lazy. They came in to dominate the academy.
Right.
And it's really a sad thing. It's a lot of kids that I think have been, they haven't been given what they need. I'm not saying in every case. I mean, I've watched university professors. I watched one at Yale, and he was tremendous. I mean, he was dressed to the nines, and he was organized, and he was communicative, and he was extraordinarily knowledgeable. I said, that guy right there is what they should have right across the board.
Yeah.
And well worth the money. And the students, if they're going to pay that type of tuition, they're getting a great education. But then you see others, and it's like they crawled out from underneath the mattress with a bong pipe still in their ear from 1969. It's just like it hasn't changed. It's-
Right.
Yeah.
Evaluating people's moral
true. It is
character
true.
now is
Yeah.
very, very useful,
Yeah.
particularly as you're evaluating over this period of time. If we run into hyperinflation, if there is anything that you're seeing your children